The Cozy Corner Café was a haven. It nestled on Maple Street. Autumn leaves danced outside its windows. Inside, the aroma of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. Soft jazz played in the background. It was a place where stories began.
I visited every day. I was a writer with dreams. My laptop was my constant companion. I'd sit in my usual spot, a worn leather armchair in the back corner. From there, I could observe the world and write about the people I saw.
Liam worked behind the counter. His smile was warm and genuine. He had a poet's soul. Between serving lattes, he'd scribble verses on napkins. Sometimes he'd glance at Emma. He wondered about her stories, but he never interrupted her work. The regulars came and went, forming a tapestry of small-town life. There was old Mr. Johnson with his crossword puzzles, the high school teacher grading papers, and Sophie, Emma's bubbly best friend. She'd bounce in for quick chats. The cafe was more than a business, it was a community. Emma's day started like any other. She woke up early, packed her laptop and favourite pen. The walk to the cafe was crisp, with leaves crunching under her feet. But when she arrived, something was different. Her usual spot was taken. A young couple sat there, lost in conversation.
I hesitated at the door. I felt oddly displaced. My safe space was occupied. I almost turned to leave, but then I saw it, an empty table by the window. Sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating the floating dust motes. It looked inviting, different but nice.
Emma took a deep breath and decided to try something new. As she settled in, she felt exposed. The cafe looked different from this angle. She could see the counter clearly now, and there was Liam, looking right at her. He smiled and gave a little wave. Emma felt her cheeks warm. She quickly looked down at her laptop, but a small smile played on her lips. Emma tried to focus on her writing, but the new perspective was distracting. She found herself people-watching more than usual. Her eyes kept drifting to the counter, to Liam. He moved with an easy grace, his hands sure as he crafted drinks. Liam noticed Emma's new spot too. He wondered why she'd moved. He liked seeing her face clearly now. When there was a lull, he decided to check on her. He approached with a fresh pot of coffee.
Refill?
Oh, yes, please.
As Liam poured, Emma noticed his hands. They were artist's hands, long fingers with ink stains.
Do you write?
Liam looked surprised, then he smiled.
Poetry, nothing serious.
They chatted for a moment about writing and dreams. Emma felt a connection spark. Liam's eyes were kind, his voice soothing. When he left, Emma felt lighter somehow. She turned back to her laptop, but now her story had taken an unexpected turn. The next day, Emma chose the window seat again. She told herself it was for the light, but her eyes kept drifting to the counter. Liam was there, as always. This time he caught her looking. He grinned and winked. Emma blushed, but didn't look away. During a quiet moment, Liam approached, holding a napkin in his hand.
I wrote something. Would you like to read it?
Emma nodded, curious. The napkin held a short poem. It was about autumn leaves and new beginnings. Emma's heart fluttered. Inspired, she wrote a response. She poured her feelings onto the page. It was about taking chances and unexpected joy. When Liam came to clear her cup, she handed him the paper. Their fingers brushed. A spark of electricity passed between them. This became their ritual. Each day they'd exchange poems, sometimes funny, sometimes deep. They were getting to know each other through metaphors and similes, in stanzas and verses. It was a dance of words and emotions, and with each poem they fell a little more. Sophie noticed the change in Emma. Her friend seemed lighter, happier. She'd catch Emma smiling at her phone or scribbling furiously in her notebook. Sophie was curious. She decided to investigate.
Spill.
Sophie demanded with a grin. Emma tried to play innocent, but Sophie wasn't fooled. She'd seen the looks between Emma and Liam, the shy smiles and lingering glances. Emma finally confessed. She told Sophie about the poems, about the connection she felt with Liam.
You need to ask him out.
Sophie insisted. Emma balked. She was scared. What if she was reading too much into it? Sophie wouldn't hear it. She encouraged Emma to be brave, to follow her heart for once. As they talked, Liam approached with refills. Sophie watched their interaction closely. The way Emma's eyes lit up, how Liam's smile softened. When he left, Sophie raised an eyebrow.
See, he likes you too. Take a chance, Em. You deserve happiness.
Emma took Sophie's advice to heart. The next day, she arrived at the cafe with determination. She'd written a special poem. It wasn't just about autumn or writing. It was about new love and taking chances. Her hand shook as she handed it to Liam. Liam read it, his eyes widening. He looked at Emma with wonder. Without a word, he took her hand. He led her to a quiet corner. There, they talked. Really talked about their dreams, their fears. They shared childhood stories and future hopes. Hours passed unnoticed. From that day, everything changed. Emma and Liam's relationship blossomed. They'd take walks after his shift. They'd read to each other in the park. Emma found herself writing love stories. Liam's poetry became more passionate. The cafe watched their love grow with fond smiles. Autumn deepened around them. The days grew shorter, but for Emma and Liam, everything was bright. They were falling in love. It was beautiful and scary, exhilarating and comforting. Emma had never felt so alive. She thought this was her happily ever after. But life had other plans. One crisp morning, Emma received an email. It was from a prestigious publishing house in New York. They loved her latest story. They wanted to offer her a book deal. But there was a catch. She'd need to move to the city for at least a year.
I was stunned. This was my dream, the chance I'd been waiting for. But now it felt bittersweet.
She thought of Liam, of their budding relationship, of the life she'd built here. Her heart was torn. She didn't know what to do.
I shared the news with Liam that evening. His face showed a mix of emotions, pride, happiness, and fear.
This is amazing, Em. You deserve it.
But Emma heard the sadness in his voice. She felt it in her own heart. They talked late into the night, about dreams and sacrifices, about long distance and uncertainty. They both knew this was a crossroads. Emma had a decision to make. It would change everything. She felt the weight of it pressing down on her. Sleep eluded her that night. The days that followed were tense. Emma threw herself into her writing. She tried to drown out her thoughts. Liam was quieter at the cafe. His smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. They still exchanged poems, but now they were tinged with melancholy.
Follow your heart.
Sophie tried to help. She listened as Emma poured out her fears. But Emma's heart was divided between her lifelong dream and this new, precious love. She felt like she was being torn in two.
Liam struggled too. He wanted to support me. He knew how much this meant to me, but the thought of losing me was painful.
He wrote poem after poem about letting go and holding on, about love that transcends distance. His heart was on every page. The deadline loomed closer. Emma had to give her answer soon. She spent hours at the cafe watching the people she'd grown to love. She thought about New York, the excitement, the opportunities. But then she'd look at Liam and her resolve would waver. She'd never felt so conflicted. The day before her deadline, Emma sat by the window. She watched the autumn leaves fall. Each one felt like a moment slipping away. Liam approached with her usual order. Their eyes met. In that moment, everything became clear.
I stood up. I told Liam how much he meant to me, how the thought of leaving him broke my heart.
When she finished, he pulled her close. He kissed her, right there in the cafe. The regulars burst into applause. Emma knew she'd made her decision. She'd stay. She'd choose love. This was just the beginning of their story. The cafe buzzed with excitement. News of Emma and Liam's romance had spread. Emma found herself writing at the counter now. It was the perfect balance.
My poetry evolved about love that feels like coming home.
Customers started requesting copies of his poems. Soon, a little book of cafe poetry was born. As autumn deepened, so did their love. They took long walks in the crisp air. They cuddled under blankets, reading to each other.
I started writing a novel. Liam supported me every step of the way.
The cozy corner cafe remained their special place, where they fell in love over shared words and stolen glances.